Yesterday, Sayadaw spoke about the fifth among the causes to make the 5 ruling factors sharp. And that is Samadhi Nimeta Gahena. So this speaks about samadhi. And samadhi is a word that is very familiar to most of us, but very few people understand in a precise way what samadhi means. And even people who have studied the text can't speak easily about it in a way that people can understand. And in fact, Sayadaw himself studied the text, and he knew the meaning of the text. But it was only after he practiced meditation that he understood what samadhi was all about. And this was due to the fact that he practiced under the guidance, overall guidance of Mahasi Sayadaw, and who taught in accordance with the Buddha, with what the Buddha said, and explained in a practical way what the meaning of the text is when we practice. Samadhi means not to let the mind go free. And it says, as the saying goes, note at every arising, always guard the mind. So one should always guard the mind with sati. In the body, whenever an observable object arises, then one works to observe it. One applies ardent effort and accurate aiming. And when sati arises, then the mind falls collectedly on that object. Whatever object arises, when sati sticks to the object, then the mind becomes collected on that object. So when sati is there, the mind becomes collected. That means that it doesn't go anywhere else. It stays right there. And this is the characteristic of samadhi, that the mind is not scattered, but it doesn't scatter. So it also functions to keep the mind collected on the object. And this is called in Pali Sempendana Rasa. Its function is to collect the mind. Khanika Samadhi is what occurs on it occurs on whatever mind and matter, rupa and nama, arise in the body. When one observes, then the mind sinks into that object. So the mind, this is the collectedness of mind on the momentary object. So because it is occurring on the object that occurs moment after moment, the nama and rupa that is really in our body, it is called khanika. And when the mind is collected in this way, both it doesn't scatter and it's collected on the object, then the mind doesn't move at all due to the agitation of anger, dosa. It doesn't move at all due to the agitation of raga, lust, or to any other mental defilement. There's no shaking. So when our noting is going well, then the mind becomes quite calm. So this is due to the fact of it being undisturbed by raga, dosa, and so on. And this is how samadhi manifests in our mind. This is called akara. So it makes the mind peaceful. And then one becomes, there's joyous interest in the object. Piti arises, and one feels happiness, sukha. So because of one's interest in the object. And this sukha is the nearest cause for the peaceful mind, for the mind to become peaceful. So each thing arises due to its own cause. And this samadhi, because it arises on what is really there, the nama and rupa really there in our body, it is called kanika. And the Buddha called it kanika cetekagata. From time to time, the yogi's noting doesn't go well. Just like sometimes when we eat, it's not very tasty. Seems like the same thing again and again. And at those times, though, when we remember some really good food that we had, when was the food really tasty to us? And when we remember that, sometimes we can recover our zeal for eating. And it's like that with noting. Sometimes our noting doesn't go well. We're noting, of course, but then sometimes we slip and miss the note, and then the mind scatters. So at that time we have to remember how we established good samadhi in the past. And this is called nimetagaha. So this means that we should use again the method that we used in the past to gain good samadhi. So we have to remember well the way that we gained samadhi so that we can use this again when our practice isn't going well. Yesterday, Sayadaw spoke about the kinds of samadhi. And the first, kanika samadhi. Second, upachara samadhi. Third, apana samadhi. Kanika samadhi occurs when one makes effort and aims in order to observe the true dhammas of nama and rupa which arise in one's body when they arise. One makes effort and aims, and then there's sati. Therefore we can observe the object. And there's various types of objects. And whatever arises, because we observe it steadfastly, sati sticks to the object and the mind becomes collected on that object. So that is samadhi. Some people think that samadhi only exists when we focus on one object again and again and again, the same object. This kind of samadhi takes as its object a concept. Here we are observing the mind and matter that really exist in our body. As soon as they arise, applying ardent energy called atapa in Pali. And to the extent that energy is applied, this ardent effort, sati arises. And when sati sticks to the object, the mind doesn't run anywhere. So the mind becomes collected on the object. One instance of this collected mind is not much, but when you gather them together one after another consecutively, they become very strong. And an analogy for this is that of a rope a piece of rope that is made up of many strands of fiber that are wound together. And just if you take one individual strand, it's not very strong. But if you take another strand and wind it around that so that you have two together or three together wound up, when you make something that has many strands wound together, then the rope can become very strong. And this is the nature of how samadhi becomes strong. We put our attention on the body, and whatever arises, we observe it when it arises, the Dhamma that is really there. And some people, because they've read a bit here and there, they have this idea that samadhi can only occur when one is focused on the same object for a long time. And this is something that it poses a danger to the practice of the Dhamma when people have this idea, because this idea gets in the way of their being able to accept the practice. The Pali Sayadaw recited was Sopi. That means Kanika Samadhi too. So not just Apana Samadhi, but Kanika Samadhi also. Chittang Nichalang Tapeti. Kanika Samadhi too can make the mind stable. That's what that means. And in what way? It is said, apito viya. Just like absorption, concentration, just like apana samadhi. So how does it happen? In the Pali it said, patipekena anabhibhuto. That it's not overwhelmed by the opposing factors called the nivaranas. Wanting to see good things, hear good things, smell, taste, touch good things. Wanting better and better things. This is a disturbance to the bhavana mind. And this is one of the nivaranas. Sometimes the mind is angry, rotten, and so hateful, dissatisfied. And this also is a disturbance to the mind, to the bhavana mind. The mind is sluggish. It backs off. It doesn't want to do anything. This is the obstacle of tina meda, sloth and torpor. The mind becomes scattered for no reason at all. And being scattered, it goes to thoughts of unwholesome things we did in the past. And one feels remorse. It goes to thoughts about wholesome things we didn't do. We regret. So these also are obstacles. And then there's doubt. Is there really a Buddha? Did he really exist? Did he really teach this Dhamma? If we practice the Dhamma, will the mind become clean? And the doubts that one can dwell upon in one's mind are like building a ladder in the sky. There's nothing firm on which it's placed. And this is vicikicca, skeptical doubt. So for those who don't practice bhavana, who don't practice development of the mind, these happen all the time, except for when one is asleep. And these are called the nivaranas. These are the dhammas which prevent wholesomeness of even the best kind. They prevent wholesomeness from occurring. And they weaken knowledge. It is said that the nivaranas are panya dubalikarana. They weaken knowledge. The knowledge that is able to, the wholesome knowledge that is able to discern between mind and matter, nama and rupa, that is able to see how they are related as cause and effect. The nivaranas, the obstacles to concentration, they weaken this knowledge. And in the world, this is very strong. This is happening in many places. And as a result, people, because people think that, so Khanika Samadhi is not overwhelmed by the opposing factors of the nivaranas. Patipekena anabhibuddho. So it's free of the nivaranas. And therefore it can make the mind stable the way apana samadhi can. Setan nechalang tapeti. So how does one make this happen? How does it happen that it is not overwhelmed? That the Khanika Samadhi is not overwhelmed? It said, Pavatamano, this Khanika Samadhi, momentary concentration, needs to flow like a river, one moment of Samadhi following another, after another. And then it won't be overwhelmed. Where does the Samadhi need to occur? It is said, aramane. So it has to occur on every newly arising object. And how is nirantaram? There can't be any gaps between one moment of Samadhi and the next. If one gazes or daydreams, in those moments there is a gap. So this is weakening, breaking one's Samadhi. So it's said that one has to have continuous nirantaram without a break. And in that way, although the objects are many, however, the Khanika Samadhi seems to be just one thing. And this is called ekakarena. It occurs, it seems to be just one thing, just the way when a river flows, it seems to be just one thing. The Samadhi flows like a river, and it seems to be as one. Not like many moments, it seems like one. So when it occurs like that, it won't be overwhelmed by the nivaranas. And why this is because effort, sati, and samadhi are blowing away the nivaranas. Virya, sati, and samadhi blow away the nivaranas. So one has to note, observe in this way so as to make the samadhi good. So when samadhi becomes good like that, then vipassana knowledge, beginning with the discernment of nama and rupa, mind and matter, and how they are related as cause and effect, vipassana knowledge can become complete. And so what we are doing has this end. If we practice accordingly, vipassana knowledge will become complete. If we don't practice accordingly, vipassana knowledge won't become complete. So if we want our practice to succeed, then to the extent that we are able to apply effort and accurate aim to observe the object, so the sati arises, to that extent the collected mind will occur. The mind will be collected on the object. And to the extent that the mind becomes collected, then knowledge will arise. And one will be able to see even very, very small details. First of all, what one needs is the basic understanding that when one does something good, it brings good results. When one does something bad, it brings bad results. So for those who don't like to experience bad things and who want to have good things, such people with this understanding will avoid doing the things that bring bad results and will undertake to do the things that bring good results. Just the way with eating food, with the understanding of what is good for us and what isn't good for us, when we avoid the foods that we're allergic to, that are not suitable for us, then we don't get the bad results associated with eating that food that is not agreeable for us. And when we eat food that is good for us in a moderate amount, then we get the results, the good results that are connected with eating that good food. So this understanding regarding our actions, the ability to consider, to weigh and reflect, is very important. If there is this basic understanding, this basic mental attitude, then faith will follow. This is possible. So, following on faith, there's the desire to avoid the things that are going to cause us trouble and to undertake the things that can bring about goodness for us. But these don't happen without us doing anything. One has to have no consideration for one's life or limb, for one's body or life. So only courageous people are able to practice in this way. It's very important, as soon as the object arises, that one applies ardent effort. Because if one doesn't apply effort to observe the object as soon as it arises, then there will be no sati. Without sati, there will be no samadhi. Without samadhi, there will be no knowledge. On the other hand, if one can apply one's effort moment after moment, so that the collected mind becomes continuous, so that it seems just to be seamless, like one single piece of fabric, then one can draw the conclusion, this person is practicing respectfully. And if one comes to the interviews, on the other hand, and has nothing to say time after time after time, then it's evident. Either the student does not know the practice, doesn't know the benefits of the practice, knows about the benefits of the practice but doesn't value them, or knows about the benefits, values them, but doesn't have any desire to, doesn't actually do the work to achieve them. So this is a practice which makes us truly human. It gives us the ability to keep our mind and heart humane. And although we're human with human intelligence, it brings a better than average human intelligence. So the teachers, therefore, have to explain and encourage in this way. Some are able to experience that the mind and matter in their body is very coarse, and also it's very subtle. So it's what happens in our mind and body, what happens inside of us. It can either be extremely coarse, it can be extremely subtle and refined. So it is very, very profound. And because it is profound, it is hard to see. So can something that is profound like this become easy to see? become clear in our mind's eye. And it is said that patipeka vidhamanena supakatang bhaveya, that when the nivaranas, the obstacles to concentration, are blown away, when they are dispelled, then, so this is what we have to try to do. Similarly to the description of kanika samadhi, patipekena anhabhibhuto, when it's not overwhelmed, you have to make the kanika samadhi not overwhelmed by the nivaranas. So when one is able to get the upper hand over the nivaranas, then no matter how profound it is, no matter how subtle the object is, that no matter how profound what it is that is in one's body and mind, this will become evident in one's knowledge. Patipeka vidhamanang pana samapatipati patibadang. So this says that the task of blowing out the nivaranas depends upon systematic practice. This will only happen when the practice is systematic. So we put the attention on the abdomen, and when the abdomen rises, we push the mind so that it will reach the object. This is systematic practice, and we aim so that the mind is focused accurately. So this is what is involved in samapatipati, systematic practice. And to the extent that one has accurate aim and applies effort, then sati will stick to the object. Sati sticks, and therefore the mind falls collectedly on that object. So the disturbing dhammas of the nivaranas have no chance to arise. The power of virya, sati, and samadhi blow away the nivaranas. They keep them from sticking to the mind. So this dispelling of the nivaranas depends upon systematic practice. Therefore, one cannot do the practice carelessly. The yogis who have come here from abroad, some have practiced before in one way or another. But coming here, it's very important to do as the teachers here instruct. To do a bit of your old practice and a bit of this practice, try to combine them. That doesn't work. So if you use your old method of practice, then it's not going to be possible to use what is being instructed now, here. It's like when we have a piece of cloth. If we want to dye a piece of cloth, but that cloth has already been dyed another color, then if you put more dye on top of that, you won't get a true color. So what you have to do, if you have a new piece of cloth, of course, it's quite easy to dye the cloth. But if you have an old one that's already been dyed and you want to get a color just like in the package, then you use dye remover first to get all the old dye out, and then you can dye the cloth. So Sayadaw here is teaching according to the teaching of the Buddha, as instructed by the late Most Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw. And if you have practiced other methods, so for example, if you are similar to the cloth that has already been dyed, then you have to remove the dye first before you try to apply the new color of this practice. You have to be careful about this. If you are going to practice here, then you need to follow this method exactly, not do some of one and some of another. And if you can't follow the instructions given here, then it's not going to make any difference to keep on practicing. So systematic practice, samapatipati, it is said that sa sadhamma savanadhina, that the systematic practice depends upon listening to the Dhamma of the Buddha and other wise people. One has to listen to the correct method. One has to study this, because listening to the correct method, being able to practice this method is dependent, being able to practice systematically is dependent upon listening to this method. This word sadhamma is a combination of two things. Sa refers to the Buddha and other good, wise people. And Dhamma has a hidden meaning, which is that it is something which has the power to raise one up, to keep one from falling down. Who is it that the Dhamma can raise up, can keep from falling down? It's the person who practices according to the instructions of the Dhamma. The Dhamma doesn't play favorites. If one practices according to the Dhamma, then that Dhamma elevates one. So it uplifts one so that one doesn't fall down, so that one's status is raised. And thus, in order to apply the practice systematically, to practice systematically, it is necessary to listen to this method. Practice is doesn't happen without listening to the method. It is said, Tan sataricha dhammecha pasarayatan. Tan refers to listening to this practice, which is for eliminating the defilements which have been following us throughout our lifetimes. Studying, learning the method, learning this correct method. It depends on two things. It depends on faith and trust and confidence in the Buddha, Sattari, and in the Dhamma, Dhammecha. Without faith, then one won't be able to work. So, in what do we need to have faith? It said Sattari, in the Buddha, but if one doesn't believe in the person, at least in the Dhamma, Dhammecha, the Dhamma, that which bears the practitioner. So it's okay not to bow. One doesn't need to pay respects in that way to the individuals, to the teacher, to the Buddha. But one must respect the Dhamma. And when one considers, so if one considers the cause and effect relationships, that this is, I don't understand something that Sayadaw said, so please wait a minute. The Dhamma is something which occurs as cause and effect. And one should accept this. One should be able to accept this practical Dhamma. Whether one accepts the Buddha as an individual or not, one should accept this Dhamma which occurs as cause and effect. And have faith in this. So if one has faith in this too, then one can understand and come to have faith in the Buddha who taught the Dhamma. But without faith, then nothing will happen. So one has to examine oneself, examine yourself, and see. So as far as faith in the Buddha is concerned, leave that aside if that's not something you feel. But do you have faith in the practice of Satipatthana? That in using this method, one can develop purity of mind and other benefits. So if one doesn't have faith in this, or if one doesn't have, if one has faith but one doesn't practice with respect for the practice, with care, trying to work continuously, then nothing will happen. So now, for yogis who have been here since the start of the practice, the start of the retreat, it's been 1 month, and knowledge should be arising by now. By now, the yogis should be enthusiastic about the practice. So if this is not happening for you, then it's because of either there's not respectful practice, not meticulous practice, not continuous. So one has to think about this. And if during the next month, then one continues and one corrects oneself during the coming month, then there's hope. Then there's a good chance for progress. So Sayadaw hopes that the yogis will understand and value the benefits of the practice and practice with respect, meticulous care, and continuity. That's all for today. Sadhu, sadhu.